I secretly got a DNA test done on our newborn because she looks nothing like me, and discovered she isn't my daughter. When I confronted my wife with the results, she said science isn't always accurate. Don't be dramatic, you're still her father regardless of genetics. So I packed my bags and left with a note saying, I'm writing this from a hotel room at 2 a.m. because I can't sleep and I don't know where else to turn. My entire life fell apart 48 hours ago, and I'm still trying to process what happened. I need to get this out somewhere because keeping it inside is making me feel like I'm losing my mind. For context, I'm 34, and my wife Sarah is 31. We've been married for 5 years, together for 7. We tried to conceive for 3 years before Sarah finally got pregnant last year. It was the happiest moment of our lives when we found out we were having a baby. Sarah had tracked her yourself cycles religiously, we'd done fertility tests, and we'd been to specialists to make sure everything was working properly. Our daughter Emma was born 4 months ago, and she's beautiful. But from the moment I first held her, something felt off. I know newborns can look different from their parents initially, but as the weeks passed, Emma didn't develop any features that resembled me or my family. She has dark hair while both Sarah and I are blonde. Her eyes are brown while both of ours are blue. Her facial structure looks nothing like mine or anyone in my family. I tried to dismiss these concerns. I told myself that genetics can be unpredictable, that babies can inherit traits from distant relatives, that I was being paranoid. Sarah certainly didn't seem concerned, and whenever I mentioned that Emma didn't look much like me, Sarah would laugh it off and say things like she's her own little person or she'll develop your features as she grows. But the doubts kept growing. Emma is now 4 months old, and instead of developing features that resemble me, she's looking more and more like someone else entirely. The shape of her nose, her facial structure, even her expressions remind me of someone, but I couldn't place who. 3 weeks ago, I was looking through Sarah's old photos on her computer to find a baby picture of her for Emma's nursery when I came across a folder I'd never seen before. It contained recent photos of Sarah with her coworker Ryan from her marketing company. They were clearly not work-related photos, pictures of them at restaurants, walking in parks, and even some that looked quite intimate. The photos were dated throughout the time period when Sarah would have conceived Emma. I confronted Sarah about the photos, and she had explanations for all of them. Ryan was going through a difficult divorce, she said, and she was helping him through it as a friend. The restaurants were business meetings that extended into dinner. The park walks were just coincidence, they'd run into each other while she was getting exercise during her pregnancy. Her explanations seemed reasonable, but something in her delivery felt rehearsed. She was a little too quick with her answers, a little too defensive when I asked follow-up questions. That's when I started really looking at the photos of Ryan that Sarah had on her computer. The resemblance to Emma was unmistakable. Same dark hair, same brown eyes, same facial structure. The more I studied the photos, the more convinced I became that Emma looked exactly like Ryan. I know what you're thinking, I should have just asked Sarah directly if there was any possibility that Ryan could be Emma's father. But I was terrified of what the answer might be. If I was wrong, I'd be accusing my wife of infidelity based on nothing but physical appearance. If I was right, my marriage and family were built on a lie. So I decided to get a DNA test done quietly. I ordered a discreet paternity test online and collected the samples when Sarah was at work. I told myself that if the test confirmed Emma was mine, I'd never mention my suspicions to anyone and would work on trusting my wife more. If it didn't, well, I'd figure out what to do then. The results came back 2 days ago. Emma is not my biological daughter. The test showed 0% probability that I'm her father. I stared at those results for an hour, reading them over and over, hoping I'd misunderstood something. But the science was clear and unambiguous. I confronted Sarah that evening after Emma was asleep. I showed her the DNA test results and asked her to explain them. Her reaction was not what I expected. She didn't cry, she didn't apologize, she didn't even seem particularly surprised. She looked at the papers for a moment and then said, "Science isn't always accurate. These tests can be wrong. Don't be dramatic about this." "The test shows 0% probability that I'm Emma's father," I said. "How is that inaccurate?" "DNA tests aren't foolproof," she replied calmly. "There are false results all the time. Besides, you're still her father regardless of genetics. You've been taking care of her since she was born. That's what matters." I was stunned by her response. No denial, no explanation, just dismissal of the scientific evidence and an attempt to make me feel guilty for questioning the situation. "Sarah, if this test is wrong, then let's get another one done together. We can go to a medical facility and have it done properly." "Why would we do that?" she asked. "It would just upset Emma's routine, and it's unnecessary. You're being paranoid and letting your insecurities destroy our family." "My insecurities? Sarah, I have scientific proof that I'm not Emma's biological father, and your response is to call me dramatic?" "You're the only father Emma has ever known," she said. "Biology doesn't determine family. Love does. If you can't understand that, then maybe you're not the man I thought you married." The gaslighting was breathtaking. She was actually trying to make me feel guilty for discovering that she'd been deceiving me for months. "Sarah, is Ryan Emma's father?" "I'm not dignifying that question with a response," she said. "The fact that you would even ask that shows how little you trust me and how damaged your thinking has become." But her refusal to answer was an answer in itself. If Ryan wasn't Emma's father, she would have denied it immediately and been outraged by the suggestion. Instead, she was deflecting and trying to turn the conversation back to my supposed failings as a husband and father. I asked her again to explain how a DNA test showing 0% paternity could be wrong, and she said, "Science makes mistakes all the time. Remember when they said eggs were bad for you and then changed their minds? Remember when they said margarine was healthier than butter? You're putting more faith in a lab test than in your own family." The comparison was absurd, and I could see that Sarah was just throwing out any argument she could think of to avoid dealing with the truth. That's when I realized she'd probably been planning for this conversation. Her responses were too smooth, too prepared. She'd thought about what she would say if I ever discovered the truth, and her strategy was complete denial combined with emotional manipulation. I told her I was leaving and would be back for my things when I'd figured out what to do next. "You're abandoning your daughter over a piece of paper?" she said as I packed a bag. "Emma needs her father, and you're going to walk away because of some test that might not even be accurate?" I left without responding, but I did leave a note on the kitchen counter. "Science was accurate enough for you to track you yourself for 3 years while trying to conceive. It's accurate enough to tell us who Emma's father really is." Update 1. It's been a week since I left, and the situation has somehow gotten even more complicated. Thank you to everyone who commented with support and advice. Reading your responses helped me realize that I'm not crazy for trusting scientific evidence over my wife's gaslighting. Sarah has been calling and texting constantly, alternating between begging me to come home and attacking me for abandoning my family. She's also enlisted her family and some of our mutual friends to contact me and try to convince me that I'm overreacting. Her mother called me yesterday with a prepared speech about how children born from love are more important than children born from biology and how I was destroying an innocent baby's life over technicalities. When I explained that the issue wasn't Emma's parentage but Sarah's deception and refusal to acknowledge the truth, her mother said I was splitting hairs and looking for excuses to avoid responsibility. The most frustrating part is that everyone seems to be focusing on Emma rather than on Sarah's betrayal and ongoing lies. Yes, I love Emma and I've bonded with her over the past 4 months. But I can't raise a child with someone who has fundamentally lied to me about something this significant and continues to gaslight me when confronted with evidence. Sarah's sister sent me a long text message saying that Sarah had confided in her about my paranoid behavior and my obsession with DNA tests. According to the sister, Sarah is heartbroken that I would choose a lab result over my own daughter and is worried about my mental health. But the most revealing development came when I finally got access to our cell phone records. I'd been paying for our family plan but hadn't looked closely at the usage details before. When I reviewed the records for the past year, I found extensive communication between Sarah and Ryan throughout her pregnancy and continuing until now. We're talking about hundreds of texts and phone calls, including several hour-long conversations that happened late at night while I was asleep. There were also calls between them on the days when Sarah told me she was staying late at work or meeting friends. Armed with this information, I called Sarah and asked her directly about her relationship with Ryan. "We're just friends," she insisted. "He's been going through a difficult time with his divorce, and I've been supporting him. There's nothing inappropriate about our friendship." "Sarah, you talked to him for 2 hours last Tuesday night starting at 11 p.m. What kind of support requires a 2-hour phone conversation in the middle of the night?" "He was having a crisis with his custody situation," she said. "I was helping him work through his options. I couldn't just hang up on him when he needed someone to talk to." "And the 47 text messages you exchanged with him last Friday while I was at work?" "I don't keep track of how many messages I send to people," she said, getting defensive. "We text about work projects and he asks for advice about his personal situation. There's nothing wrong with being a supportive friend." But then I asked the question that I'd been dreading. "Sarah, did you sleep with Ryan?" There was a long pause before she answered. I'm not going to dignify that accusation with a response. The fact that you would even ask that question shows how little respect you have for me and our marriage. Again, her refusal to give a direct denial spoke volumes. She could have simply said no and been outraged by the question. Instead, she was deflecting and making me the villain for asking. I told her that her non-answer was all the confirmation I needed, and that I would be filing for divorce. "You're really going to destroy our family over your paranoid suspicions?" she said. "You're going to abandon Emma and me because you've convinced yourself of something that isn't true? I'm ending our marriage because you had an affair, had another man's baby, and have been lying to me about it for months while trying to make me think I'm crazy for questioning the situation." She hung up on me. Update 2. 2 weeks have passed, and I've now officially filed for divorce. My lawyer was not surprised by the situation and said that paternity fraud cases, while not common, are definitely something she's handled before. She advised me to get a second DNA test done through a certified lab to make sure the results would be admissible in court, which I did. The results were identical, 0% probability that I'm Emma's biological father. Sarah's response to the divorce filing was to hire her own lawyer and immediately file for spousal support and child support. Her position is that regardless of biology, I'm Emma's legal father because I'm married to Sarah and was present at Emma's birth. According to her lawyer, I have financial responsibility for Emma until and unless someone else legally claims paternity. This is where things get interesting. I had my lawyer contact Ryan directly and inform him about the situation. Ryan apparently had no idea that Emma might be his daughter. According to his response through his own lawyer, Sarah had never told him she was pregnant, never told him she'd had a baby, and never suggested that he might be the father. Ryan agreed to take a DNA test, and the results came back yesterday. He is Emma's biological father with 99.97% certainty. But here's the truly messed up part. When my lawyer informed Sarah's lawyer about Ryan's paternity test results, Sarah's response was to claim that Ryan must have somehow contaminated or falsified his test results because he doesn't want the responsibility of raising a child. She's now claiming that both DNA tests are wrong, that there's a conspiracy between Ryan and me to avoid our responsibilities, and that the lab we used is known for producing false results. Her lawyer actually submitted a motion requesting that the court order a third DNA test from a different lab, claiming that the previous tests were compromised. Sarah has also escalated her campaign to paint me as the villain in this situation. She's been posting on social media about deadbeat fathers who abandon their children and men who choose their ego over their family. She's never mentioned the DNA test results or the affair, just vague posts about how some people will find any excuse to avoid responsibility. Several of our mutual friends have reached out to me asking for my side of the story, because Sarah's social media posts make it sound like I just randomly decided to abandon my wife and baby for no reason. I've been selectively sharing the truth with close friends and family. The reactions have been mixed but mostly supportive once people understand what actually happened. My parents were initially confused and disappointed that I was leaving Emma, but once I showed them the DNA test results and explained about Sarah's affair, they were horrified on my behalf. She let you believe that baby was yours for 4 months? My mother said. She let you bond with Emma, knowing that she wasn't your biological daughter? That's beyond cruel. My father was even more direct. Son, you can't build a life with someone who lies about something this fundamental. If she'd lie about this, she'd lie about anything. But Sarah's family has doubled down on their support for her. Her father called me last week and actually threatened me, saying that if I continued to spread lies about Sarah and tried to destroy her reputation, he would take action to protect his daughter and granddaughter. I recorded that conversation and provided it to my lawyer, who said that threats from Sarah's family would actually help our case by demonstrating the hostile environment I was dealing with. Update 3. A month has passed since I left, and the legal situation is getting more complicated while the personal situation somehow keeps getting worse. The court did order a third DNA test from a different lab, and surprise, the results were identical to the first 2 tests. I am not Emma's father, and Ryan is. Sarah's response to the third test was to claim that all 3 labs must be part of some kind of conspiracy, and that DNA testing in general is unreliable. Her lawyer has apparently advised her to stop making these claims in legal documents, but Sarah continues to insist to anyone who will listen that the tests are wrong. But the real bombshell came when Ryan decided to investigate his own situation more thoroughly. He hired a private investigator to look into his interactions with Sarah during the time period when Emma would have been conceived. The private investigator discovered that Sarah and Ryan had been having an affair for over 8 months, starting well before Sarah became pregnant. They had been meeting at hotels, going on weekend trips when I thought Sarah was visiting her sister, and Ryan had actually been paying for many of their activities. The private investigator also found evidence that Sarah had been actively trying to get pregnant during their affair. She had told Ryan that she was having problems in her marriage and was considering leaving me, and that she wanted to have a baby with him. Ryan thought they were building toward a future together. But according to the evidence the investigator uncovered, Sarah had no intention of leaving me. She was playing both of us. She was telling Ryan that she was going to leave her husband, while telling me that she'd never been happier in our marriage. She was using Ryan for excitement and emotional fulfillment while using me for financial security and social respectability. The most damning evidence was a series of text messages between Sarah and her best friend from around the time Emma was conceived. In these messages, Sarah explicitly discussed her plan to get pregnant by Ryan but let me believe the baby was mine. He'll never suspect anything, she wrote to her friend. Ryan looks enough like my name that the baby could pass for either of theirs. And my name makes twice what Ryan makes, so it's better for everyone if he thinks he's the father. Her friend had apparently encouraged this plan, responding with messages like "You're so smart to think ahead like this and the baby will have a better life with my name as the father anyway." When Ryan learned about these messages, he was devastated. He realized that Sarah had been using him just as much as she'd been using me, but in a different way. She'd manipulated him into believing they had a future together while planning all along to pass his child off as mine. Ryan has now filed for full custody of Emma. He wants to be part of his daughter's life, but he also wants to protect her from Sarah's manipulation. His lawyer argues that Sarah's willingness to lie about Emma's parentage for months demonstrates that she lacks the moral character necessary to raise a child properly. Sarah's response has been to claim that Ryan is an unfit father because he abandoned her when she was pregnant. She's conveniently ignoring the fact that she never told him she was pregnant or that the baby might be his. Meanwhile, I'm caught in the middle of a custody battle for a child who isn't mine, married to a woman who's been lying to me for over a year about fundamentally everything in our relationship. The strangest part is that I still love Emma. I spent 4 months believing she was my daughter, caring for her, bonding with her. Those feelings don't just disappear because of a DNA test. But I also can't stay in a marriage built on deception, and I can't pretend that Sarah's behavior is somehow excusable. Update 4, final. It's been 3 months since I discovered the truth, and I wanted to provide a final update since so many people have followed this story and offered support throughout this nightmare. The divorce has been finalized. Because Emma is not my biological child and Sarah's affair was documented through the private investigator's evidence, I was not required to pay child support. The court also agreed that Sarah's deception constituted fraud, which affected the division of assets in my favor. Ryan was awarded joint custody of Emma after a lengthy court battle. The judge was particularly critical of Sarah's attempt to hide Emma's parentage from her biological father and noted that her behavior showed a concerning pattern of deception and manipulation. Sarah was ordered to attend parenting classes and counseling as a condition of maintaining her custody rights. She was also required to formally acknowledge Ryan as Emma's father and to facilitate his relationship with his daughter. But the most significant development was that Sarah's best friend, feeling guilty about her role in the deception, came forward with additional evidence that helped both Ryan's and my legal cases. She provided text messages, voice recordings, and even photos that documented the extent of Sarah's planning and manipulation. According to her friend's testimony, Sarah had been planning this deception for months before she became pregnant. She had researched the legal implications of paternity fraud, looked into how long she could reasonably maintain the deception, and even practiced responses for what she would say if I became suspicious. Sarah planned every aspect of this, her friend told the court. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she knew how much it would hurt both men when they found out the truth. But she thought she could maintain the lie indefinitely. The friend also revealed that Sarah had had similar affairs during previous relationships and had a pattern of manipulating multiple men simultaneously for different purposes. This testimony was devastating to Sarah's credibility and helped establish that her behavior wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness, but a calculated pattern of deception. Sarah has since moved back in with her parents and is struggling with the consequences of her actions. She lost several friendships when the full extent of her deception became public, and her reputation in our social circle has been permanently damaged. She made one final attempt to contact me about 2 weeks ago, asking if we could meet to discuss our situation like adults. When I declined, she sent me a long letter claiming that she still loved me and that we could work through this if I was willing to forgive her mistakes and focus on building a future together. The letter showed that even now, months later, Sarah still doesn't understand the magnitude of what she did. She was still characterizing months of deliberate deception as mistakes and still expecting me to take responsibility for fixing the damage she had caused. I didn't respond to her letter. As for Emma, I still think about her often. Ryan has been gracious about allowing me to see her occasionally, understanding that I bonded with her during her first 4 months and that cutting off contact completely would be difficult for everyone involved. It's strange being in her life as neither her father nor a stranger, but rather as someone who cared for her during her earliest days based on a lie. But seeing her with Ryan, watching him discover fatherhood and build a relationship with his daughter, has been healing in its own way. Ryan and I have developed an unexpected friendship through this situation. We were both victims of Sarah's manipulation, and we found comfort in being able to talk to someone who truly understands what we went through. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal, Ryan told me recently. It was the gaslighting afterward, the way she tried to make us feel crazy for believing obvious evidence and trusting our own instincts. I've started therapy to work through the trust issues and emotional damage from this experience. My therapist has helped me understand that what Sarah did constitutes a form of psychological abuse, and that my response of leaving was not only justified but necessary for my mental health. I'm dating someone new now, a woman who values honesty and communication above all else. I told her about my situation early in our relationship, and her response was immediate support and understanding. The fact that you insisted on the truth even when it was painful shows your character, she said. A lot of people would have just accepted the lie because it was easier. I've learned that some betrayals are too fundamental to overcome, especially when the person who betrayed you shows no genuine remorse or understanding of what they've done. Sarah never apologized for the deception itself, only for getting caught and for the consequences that followed. Looking back, I'm grateful that I trusted my instincts and pursued the DNA test despite Sarah's attempts to make me feel paranoid and controlling. The truth was painful, but it was better than building a life on a foundation of lies. Some people have asked if I regret losing the 4 months I had with Emma before discovering the truth. I don't. Those months taught me that I could love a child deeply and would make a good father someday. They also taught me that biology isn't the only thing that creates parental bonds. But they also taught me that love and family must be built on honesty and trust, and that no relationship can survive when one person is willing to deceive the other about something so fundamental. Emma will grow up knowing the truth about her parentage and having relationships with both her biological father and the man who cared for her during her first months of life. That's a complicated situation, but it's better than growing up in a household built on lies and manipulation. As for Sarah, I hope she eventually gets the help she needs to understand why her behavior was so harmful and to develop the capacity for genuine relationships based on honesty rather than manipulation. But that's no longer my responsibility or concern. I'm building a new life based on truth, trust, and genuine connection. It's taken months to recover from the damage Sarah caused, but I'm finally starting to feel like myself again. Science was indeed accurate, and so were my instincts.